After about 2 stanzas, I'm gonna switch to a 1-minute story. And then I'll do a couple of poems. A little bit crunch there. Let's move up, shift in. Bum, ba-dum, ba-dum. Percy. Harold the Half-Beard. He's a skald. It's a poetic Viking, because they used to have this revered position in society known as the skald. And the skald was like basically the guy that kept the entire oral tradition for the Viking clan, and throughout the histories and the poetics and the tales of epic lore. And this was a tradition that was passed down through the generations. The skalds were these people in the community, and sometimes it was an older guy who might have been a warrior back in the day, but he just happened to survive, banged up, might be missing an eye, long gray hair. Everyone respects him. He's the only one that actually has the knowledge that we would have today in books, but it's all in his head. So he's seen as like a sage old wizard, and that is a very inspiring concept to me. Here is another skald. This is Samuel Taylor Coleridge. I think he was fairly addicted to heroin, or the early version of heroin, like Chinese traded. Actually, it wasn't really Chinese traded until the English brought it in via their colonial holdings in the Middle East, I believe. Either way, Samuel Taylor Coleridge loved this stuff. Today, I'm gonna read a poem that he wrote called The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. And The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, it's a long sort of ballad-like poem. It starts off with this guy, he's at a wedding, and the wedding guests get called into the other room. This guy shows up out of nowhere, grizzled, old, sea-weathered man, and he says, "I gotta tell you a story." And he just reads him this crazy poem about the ancient mariner going out to sea. And this poem is the origin of the expression, an albatross around your neck. It's gonna take a little bit to get into cadence. I'm gonna do what I can, but yeah, a few stumbles along the way, but a smooth sea never made a skilled sailor. It is an ancient mariner, and he stoppeth one of 3. By thy long grey beard and glittering eye, now wherefore stopp'st thou me? The bridegroom's doors are opened wide, and I am next of kin. The guests are met, the feast is set, mayst hear the merry din. He holds him with his skinny hand. "There was a ship," quoth he. "Hold off, unhand me, grey-beard loon." Eftsoons his hand dropped he. He holds him with his glittering eye. The wedding guest stood still, and listens like a 3 years child. The mariner hath his will. The wedding guest sat on a stone, he cannot choose but hear, and thus spake on that ancient man, the bright-eyed mariner. The ship was cheered, the harbor cleared, merrily did we drop, below the kirk, below the hill, below the lighthouse top. The sun came up upon the left, out of the sea came he, and he shone bright, and on the right went down into the sea. Higher and higher every day, till over the mast at noon, the wedding guest here beat his breast, for he heard the loud bassoon. The bride hath passed into the hall, red as a rose is she, nodding their heads before her goes the merry minstrelsy. The wedding guest he beat his breast, yet he cannot choose but hear. And thus spake on that ancient man, the bright-eyed mariner. And now the storm blast came, and he was tyrannous and strong. He struck with his o'ertaking wings, and chased us south along, with sloping masts and dipping prow, as who pursued with yell and blow, still treads the shadow of his foe, and forward bends his head. The ship drove fast, loud roared the blast, and southward high we fled. And now there came both mist and snow, and it grew wondrous cold, and ice mast high came floating by, as green as emeralds. And though the drifts, the snowy cliffs, did send a dismal sheen, nor shapes of men nor beasts we ken, the ice was all between. The ice was here, the ice was there, the ice was all around. It cracked and growled and roared and howled like noises in a swound. At length did cross an albatross, thorough the fog it came. As if it had been a Christian soul, we hailed it in God's name. It ate the food it ne'er had eat, and round it flew. The ice did split with a thunder fit, the helmsman steered us through. and a good south wind sprung up behind. The albatross did follow, and every day for food or play came to the mariner's hollow. In mist or cloud or mast or shroud, and perched for vespers 9, whilst all the night through fog smoke white glimmered the white moonshine. God save the ancient mariner from the fiends that plague thee thus. Why look'st thou so? With my crossbow I shot the albatross. So that was part 1, and just to recap, wedding guest, wedding. Wedding guests are called into the other room. Man is stopped by an ancient mariner. He starts telling him the story about going on a boat, and they went and the weather turned and it was cold and there was ice, and one day a bird, an albatross, came swooping down, and the ice split and the weather got better. And for some reason, this mariner guy, he shot the albatross dead. Part 2. Oh, sorry, Harold. The sun now rose upon the right, out of the sea came he, still hid in mist, and on the left went down into the sea. And the good south wind still blew behind, but no sweet bird did follow, nor any day for food or play came to the mariner's hollow. And I had done a hellish thing, and it would work 'em woe, for all averred I'd killed the bird that made the breeze to blow. Sorry for the spoiler. Ah, wretch, said they, the bird to slay that made the breeze to blow, nor dim nor red like God's own head the glorious sun unrest. Then all averred I'd killed the bird that brought the fog and mist. 'Twas right, said they, such birds to slay that bring the fog and mist. The fair breeze blew, the white foam flew, the furrow followed free. We were the first that ever burst into that silent sea. Down dropped the breeze, the sails dropped down, 'twas sad as sad could be, and we did speak only to break the silence of the sea. All in a hot copper sky, the bloody sun at noon. Right up the mast, right up above the mast did stand, no bigger than the moon. Day after day we stuck, nor breath nor motion, as idle as a painted ship upon a painted ocean. Water, water everywhere, and all the boards did shrink. Water, water everywhere, nor any drop to drink. The very deep did rot, O Christ, that ever this should be. Yes, slimy things did crawl with legs upon the slimy sea. About in reel and rout, the death fires danced at night. The water like a witch's oils burnt green and blue and white. And some in dreams assured us were of the spirit that plagued us so. 9 fathom deep he had followed us from the land of mist and snow. And every tongue, through utter drought, was withered at the root. We could not speak no more than if we had been choked with soot. Ah, well a day, what evil looks had I from old and young. Instead of the cross, the albatross about my neck was hung. So basically, he shot the albatross dead, and the weather went from being icy and cold and terrible to being a complete drought atop the sea. Sun beating down, no wind, and slimy creatures start crawling all around. So it is a miserable, miserable situation. And everyone else on board is looking at this ancient mariner. He might not be ancient back then, he might be a little bit younger, but he's got a big old albatross around his neck. Part 3. There passed a weary time. Each throat was parched and glazed each eye. A weary time, how glazed each weary eye. That when looking westward, I beheld a something in the sky. At first it seemed a little speck, and then it seemed a mist. It moved and took at last a certain shape I wist. A speck, a mist, a shape I wist, and still it neared and neared, as if it dodged a water sprite. It plunged and tacked and veered. With throats unslaked, with black lips baked, we could nor laugh nor wail. Through utter drought all dumb we stood. I bit my arm, I sucked the blood, and cried, "A sail! A sail!" With throats unslaked, with black lips baked, agape they heard me call. "Gramercy!" they for joy did grin, and all at once their breath drew in, as they were drinking all. "See, see," I cried, "she tacks no more hither to work us wheel. Without a breeze, without a tide, she steadies with upright keel. The western wave was all aflame. The day was well nigh done. Almost upon the western wave rested the broad bright sun, when that strange shape drove suddenly betwixt us and the sun. And straight the sun was flecked with bars. Heaven's mother send us grace, as if through a dungeon grate he peered with broad and burning face. Alas, thought I, and my heart beat loud, how fast she nears and nears. Are those her sails that glance in the sun like restless gossameres? Are those her ribs through which the sun did peer as through a grate? And is that woman all her crew? Is that a death? And are there two? Is death that woman's mate? Her lips were red, her looks were free, her locks were yellow as gold, her skin was as white as leprosy. The nightmare life in death was she who thicks man's blood with cold. The naked hulk alongside came, and the twain were casting dice. The game is done, I've won, quoth she, and whistles thrice. The sun's rim dips, the stars rush out, at one stride comes the dark. With far-heard whisper o'er the sea, off shot the spectre bark. We listened and looked sideways up, fear at my heart as at the cup my lifeblood seemed to sip. The stars were dim and thick the night, the steerman's face by his lamp gleamed white, from the sails that did the drip. Till clomb above the eastern bar the horned moon with one bright star within the nether tip. One after one, by the star-dogged moon, too quick for groan or sigh, each turned his face with a ghastly pang and cursed me with his eye. 4 times 50 living men, and I heard nor sigh nor groan. With heavy thump, a lifeless lump, they dropped down one by one. The souls did from their bodies fly, they fled to bliss or woe, and every soul it passed me by like the whiz of my crossbow. I fear thee, ancient mariner, I fear thy skinny hand, and thou art long and lank and brown as if the ribbed sea sand. I fear thee and thy glittering eye, and thy skinny hand so brown. Fear not, thou wedding guest, this body dropped not down. Alone, alone, all alone, alone on a wide, wide sea, and never a saint took pity on my soul in agony. The many men so beautiful, and they all dead did lie, and 1,000 slimy things lived on, and so did I. I looked upon the rioting sea, and drew my eyes away. I looked upon the rotting deck, and there the dead men lay. I looked to heaven and tried to pray, but or ever a prayer had gushed, a wicked whisper came and made my heart as dry as dust. I closed my lids and kept them close, and the balls like pulses beat, for the sky and the sea and the sea and the sky lay like a load on my weary eye, and the dead were at my feet. The cold sweat melted from their limbs, nor rot nor reek did they. They look with which they looked on me had never passed away. An orphan's curse would drag to hell a spirit from on high. But oh, more horrible than that is the curse in a dead man's eye. 7 days, 7 nights I saw that curse, and yet I could not die. The moving moon went up the sky, and nowhere did abide. Softly she was going up, and a star or two beside. Her beams bemocked the sultry main, like April hoar frost spread. But where the ship's huge shadow lay, the charmed water burnt alway, a still and awful red. Nice sip. Beyond the shadow of the ship, I watched the water snakes. They moved in tracks of shining white, and when they reared, the elfish light fell off in hoary flakes. Within the shadow of the ship, I watched their rich attire. Blue, glossy, green, and velvet black, they coiled and swam, and every track was a flash of golden fire. Oh, happy living things! No tongue their beauty might declare, and spring of love gushed from my heart, and I blessed them unaware. Sure, my kind saint took pity on me, and I blessed them unaware. The selfsame moment I could pray, and from my neck so free, the albatross fell off and sank like lead into the sea. So that was part 3 and 4. I skipped over. Now we're all the way to part 5. And basically, what took place in parts 3 and 4 was that there was this ghost ship that came through and passed in between the mariner ship and the sun, and everyone died except for him. And he's left on board with a bunch of dead men who are giving him the evil eye in perpetuity in the hot and baking, blistering sun. And he's all alone with the decomposing crew on his ship with this albatross around his neck. And then as the story goes on, Coleridge, he mixes up the verses. They go from being like a classic quatrain to just all sorts of crazy little twists of 7-line verses, stanzas, whatever you call them. I don't even know the technical terms, but there's a lot of different twists going on, and it's kind of crazy because it increases sort of the ghastly feeling and the tempo of the poem. And at certain points, he's watching the water snakes, and they move in tracks of shining white, and when they reared, the elfish light fell off in hoary flakes. And so as he gets into part 5, basically, things are looking better. And the albatross slips off his neck and falls into the sea after 7 days and 7 nights of this terrible, terrible curse. The only thing I'm not really sure of is why the albatross fell off his neck. It says here in the margin, in his loneliness and fixedness, he yearneth towards the journeying moon and the stars that still sojourn, yet still move onward, and everywhere the blue sky belongs to them, and is their appointed rest in their native country and their own natural homes, which they enter unannounced. That doesn't help at all. I don't even know what those margins are. But let's go to part 5. Maybe he explains it retroactively. O sleep, it is a gentle thing, beloved from pole to pole. To Mary Queen the praise be given. She sent the gentle sleep from heaven that slid into my soul. The silly buckets on the deck that had so long remained, I dreamt that they were filled with dew, and when I awoke it rained. My lips were wet, my throat was cold, my garments all were drank. Sure I had drunken in my dreams, and still my body drank. I moved and could not feel my limbs. I was so light, almost. I thought that I had died in sleep and was a blessed ghost. And soon I heard a roaring wind. It did not come anear, but with its sound it shook the sails that were so thin and sere. The upper air burst into life, and 100 fire flags sheen. To and fro they were hurried about, and to and fro and in and out the wan stars danced between. And the coming wind did roar more loud, and the sails did sigh like sedge, and the rain poured down from one black cloud. The moon was at its edge. The thick black cloud was cleft, and still the moon was at its side. Like water shot from some high crag, the lightning fell with never a jag, a river steep and wide. The loud wind never reached the ship, and now the ship moved on. Beneath the lightning and the moon the dead men gave a groan. They groaned, they stirred, they all uprose, nor spake nor moved their eyes. It had been strange, even in a dream, to have seen those dead men rise. The helmsman steered, the ship moved on, and never a breeze up blew. The mariners all gone worked the ropes, they were wont to do. They raised their limbs like lifeless tools. We were a ghastly crew. The body of my brother's son stood by me knee to knee. The body and I pulled at one rope, but he said not to me, I fear thee, ancient mariner. Be calm, thou wedding guest. 'Twas not those souls that fled in pain, which to their courses came again, but a troop of spirits blessed. For when it dawned, they dropped their arms, and it clustered round the mast. Sweet sounds rose slowly through their mouths, and from their bodies passed. Around flew each sweet sound, then darted to the sun. Slowly the sounds came back again, now mixed, now one by one. Sometimes a dropping from the sky, I heard the skylark sing. Skylark. I heard the skylark sing. Sometimes all little birds that are, how they seem to fill the sea and air with their sweet jargoning. And now 'twas like all instruments, now like a lonely flute, and now it is an angel's song that makes the heaven be mute. It ceased, yet still the sails made on a pleasant noise till noon, a noise like of a hidden brook in the leafy month of June. that to the sleeping woods all night singeth a quiet tune. Till noon we quietly sailed on, yet never never a breeze did breathe. Slowly and smoothly went the ship, moved onward from beneath. Under the keel 9 fathom deep, from the land of mist and snow, the spirit slid, and it was he that made the ship to go. The sails at noon left off their tune, and the ship stood still also. The sun right up above the mast had fixed her to the ocean, but in a minute she gone stir, with a short uneasy motion, backwards and forwards half her length with a short uneasy motion. Then like a pawing horse let go, she made a sudden bound. It flung the blood into my head, and I fell down in a swound. How long in that same fit I lay, I have not to declare, but ere my living life returned, I heard and in my soul discerned 2 voices in the air. "Is it he?" quoth one. "Is this the man?" "By him who died on cross, with his cruel bow he laid full low the harmless albatross. The spirit who bideth by himself in the land of mist and snow, he loved the bird that loved the man who shot him with his bow. The other was a softer voice, as soft as honey dew. Quoth he, the man hath penance done, and penance more will do." So part 5, the albatross falls off his neck, water's coming down, he's loving life, having basically like an ecstatic reversion to ending the drought. And slowly but surely the boat starts to move as if propelled by a phantom wind. And the crew, the dead crew, they rise up from the dead. That's why he says, "We were a ghastly crew." And again, he's switching up verses, he's switching up tenses. I'm stumbling a little bit back and forth. But basically, by the end of part 5, the ancient mariner is on the boat and he hears 2 voices talking, because the crew was silent. The crew was completely silent, this ghost crew. But now 2 voices start to speak. We've got 2 parts left. I think we're going to finish up. And we're going to go into the first voice and the second voice having a conversation in this part. And another thing to note is that the wedding guest this whole time is freaked the fuck out by this old mariner, because he thinks that he is also a ghost, and he's telling him the story right now. So he's having a whole sort of fit of delusion. And now we go into part 6, and there's a wedding going on in the background. So for those of you who are enjoying the beginnings of wedding season right now, just imagine getting confronted by a salty old ghost sailor who's telling you this crazy story. He's talking about albatrosses, all sorts of stuff. I don't know. Seems a little nuts. So here we go, part 6. First voice. This is the kind of quiet one. And then the other one's the kind of soft one. All right. "But tell me, speak again. Thy soft response renewing, what makes that ship drive on so fast? What is the ocean doing?" "Still as a slave before his lord, the ocean hath no blast. His great bright eye most silently up to the moon is cast. If he may know which way to go, for she guides him smooth or grim. See, brother, see how graciously she looketh down on him. But why drives on that ship so fast, without or wave or wind? The air is cut away before, and closes from behind. Fly, brother, fly, more high, or we shall be belated. For slow and slow that ship will go, when the mariner's trance is abated." I woke, and we were sailing on, as in a gentle weather. 'Twas night, come night, the moon was high, the dead men stood together. All stood together on the deck, for a charnel dungeon fitter. All fixed on me their stony eyes, that in the moon did glitter. The pang, the curse, with which they died, had never passed away. I could not draw my eyes from theirs, nor turn them up to pray. And now the spell was snapped once more. I viewed the ocean green, and looked far north, yet little saw of what else had been seen. Like one that on a lonesome road doth walk in fear and dread, and having once turned round walks on, and turns no more his head, because he knows A frightful fiend doth close behind him tread, but soon there breathed a wind on me, nor sound nor motion made. Its path was not upon the sea, in ripple or in shade. It raised my hair, it fanned my cheek, like a meadow gale of spring. It mingled strangely with my fears, yet it felt like a welcoming. Swiftly, swiftly flew the ship, yet she sailed softly too. Sweetly, sweetly blew the breeze, on me alone it blew. O dream of joy, is this indeed the lighthouse top I see? Is this the hill, is this the kirk, is this mine own country? We drifted o'er the harbor bay, and I with sobs did pray, O let me be awake, my God, or let me sleep away. The harbor bay was clear as glass, so smoothly it was strewn, and on the bay the moonlight lay, and the shadow of the moon. That rock shone bright, the kirk no less, that stands above the rock, the moonlight steeped in silentness, the steady weathercock. And the bay was white with silent light, till rising from the same, full many shapes that shadows were, in crimson colors came. A little distance from the prow those crimson shadows were. I turned my eyes upon the deck. O Christ, what saw I there? Each corse lay flat, lifeless and flat, and by the holy rood, a man all light, a seraph man, on every corse there stood. The seraph band each waved his hand, it was a heavenly sight. They stood as signals to the land, for one a lovely night, each one a lovely light. The seraph band each waved his hand, no voice did they impart, no voice, but oh, the silence sank like music on my heart. But soon I heard the dash of oars, I heard the pilot's cheer, my head was turned perforce away, and I saw a boat appear, the pilot and the pilot's boy. I heard them coming fast. Dear Lord in heaven, it was a joy, the dead men could not blast. I saw a third, I heard his voice. It is the hermit good. He singeth loud his godly hymns that he makes in the wood. He'll shrieve my soul, he'll wash away the albatross's blood. That was part 6. A little bit confusing with the voices. I don't know really what is actually going on. I believe that the mariner is hearing 2 voices and they start to talk at the beginning, but then suddenly he doesn't even tell you when they stop talking. And then this third thing, they're coming into shore. He sees his country finally returning. He's getting to the start of his voyage with this dead crew on board. And I'm pretty sure they're still propelling the boat, but he doesn't really know what's going on. And then this new boat comes towards him to like basically rescue him. And a third voice starts to talk. And so I think like narratively, there's potentially a bunch of voices going on inside the wedding guest's head as well as the mariner's head. And that's sort of the confusion that is being imparted here by this loose narrative structure. But I also might just not understand it completely. But maybe that's the point. Samuel Taylor Coleridge is trying to like incept you. Who knows? Part 7 and the concluding part. This hermit good lives in that wood which slopes down to the sea. How loudly his sweet voice he rears. He loves to talk with mariners that come from a far country. He kneels at morn and noon and eve. He hath a cushion plump. It is the moss that wholly hides the rotted old oak stump. The skiff boat neared. I heard them talk. Why, this is strange, I trow. Where are those lights so many and fair? That signal made but now. Strange, by my faith, the hermit said, and they answered not our cheer. The planks look warped, and see those sails, how thin they are, and sere. I never saw aught like to them, unless perchance it were brown skeletons of leaves that lag my forest brook along, when the ivy tod is heavy with snow, and the owlet whoops to the wolf below that eats the she-wolf's young. Dear Lord, it hath a fiendish look, the pilot made reply. I am afeard, push on, said the hermit cheerily. The boat came closer to the ship, but I nor spake nor stirred. The boat came close beneath the ship, and straight a sound was heard. Under the water it rumbled on, still louder and more dread. It reached the ship, it split the bay, the ship went down like lead. Stunned by that loud and dreadful sound which sky and ocean smote, like one that hath been 7 days drowned, my body lay afloat. But swift as dreams myself I found within the pilot's boat. Upon the whirl where sank the ship, the boat spun round and round, and all was still save that the hill was telling of the sound. I moved my lips, the pilot shrieked, and fell down in a fit. The holy hermit raised his eyes and prayed, where did he sit? I took the oars. The pilot's boy, who now doth crazy go, laughed loud and long, and all the while his eyes went to and fro. Ha ha, quoth he, full plain I see, the devil knows how to row. And now, all in my own country, I stood on the firm land. The hermit stepped forth from the boat, and scarcely he could stand. Oh, shrieve me, holy man! The hermit crossed his brow. Say quick, quoth he, I did thee say, what manner of man art thou? Forthwith this frame of mine was wrenched with a woeful agony, which forced me to begin my tale, and then it left me free. Since then, at an uncertain hour, that agony returns, until my ghastly tale is told, this heart within me burns. I pass like night from land to land. I have strange power of speech. That moment that his face I see, I know the man that must hear me, to him my tale I teach. What loud uproar bursts from that door! The wedding guests are there, but in the garden bower the bride and bridemaids singing are, and hark the little vesper bell which biddeth me to prayer. O wedding guest, this soul hath been alone on our wide, wide sea. So lonely 'twas that God himself scarce seemed there to be. O sweeter than the marriage feast, 'tis sweeter far to me, to walk together to the kirk with a goodly company, to walk together to the kirk and all together pray, while each to his great Father bends, old men and babes and loving friends and youths and maidens gay. Farewell, farewell, but this I tell to thee, thou wedding guest, he prayeth well who loveth well, both man and bird and beast. He prayeth best who loveth best, all things both great and small, for the dear God who loveth us, he made and loveth all. The mariner, whose eye is bright, whose beard with age is hoar, is gone, and now the wedding guest turned from the bridegroom's door. He went like one that hath been stunned, and is of sense forlorn. A sadder and a wiser man, he rose the morrow morn. So in the final part, we have the ancient mariner getting picked up or the boat with the pilot and the hermit and the pilot's boy. They're coming to this ghost ship, and a loud sound occurs. It's like an explosion, and the boat drowns. And for some reason, the ancient mariner, he does not drown, and he's basically like lying on top of the water, basically as if he was a floating dead carcass. And the pilot and the hermit and the pilot's boy, they pick him up, they put him into the ship, and like 30 seconds later, he just wakes up with a cough and a spurt and a spill, and he grabs the oars and starts rowing. And so the hermit's freaking out. He's like, what's going on? We got this resurrected man from this boat that exploded, and he thinks it's the devil. They bring him onto land, and now the story starts to get really sad, because basically the ancient mariner, he doesn't have his normal capabilities and functions anymore. There's something wrong with him, and he kind of just drifts from place to place, finding someone who is worthy to hear the story. And that's another part that I'm gonna have to dig a little bit deeper into. But basically the ancient mariner approaches people who are supposed to hear his story, and that will eventually somehow set him free. I think potentially if he tells his story and then he finds someone to retell his story, then he can pass peacefully into the afterlife. That might be what's going on here. Anyway, the ancient mariner tells the wedding guest his story, and he finishes it with a little piece of advice. And I would like to reread that final part, because before disappearing, and the wedding guest basically goes back to the wedding, and he wakes up the next morning, and he's a sadder and a wiser man. And so I think there's basically a lot of lessons in here, and we can talk about this next time, or anytime really. But the whole message of the poem is that the wedding guest hears this story, and he's imparted this sort of melancholy wisdom because of the mariner's tale. And the final advice that the mariner gives, he prayeth best. Oh no, wait, first. Farewell, farewell, but this I tell to thee, thou wedding guest. He prayeth well who loveth well. So whoever prays well also loves well, and whoever loves well also prays well. Both man and bird and beast. That's the trifecta, man, bird, and beast. This applies to the animal kingdom. This applies to humans. This applies to beasts. He prayeth best who loveth best. All things both great and small. For the dear God who loveth us, he made and loveth all. So it's a lot of religious overtones here, but he's saying that the best way to pray to God is by loving things that are both great and small. And I think that's a tremendous message, because you have to love things that are both great and small, like the albatross that he shot down. It was just a bird flying overhead, but the mariner learned this terrible lesson because he didn't treat the bird with respect. I think that's one message. There's a lot of other ones. It's not just a pure like environmentalist or like love all animals type of thing, but it's just showing how this tiny minuscule thing became this massive albatross around its neck. Albatross is a pretty big bird, so it wasn't that tiny. But either way, it wasn't a human. He shot it down. Cursed ghost ship traveling in the hot, hot sun. Drought finally turns into an entire ghost crew, washes up on shore, and the ancient mariner is kind of a ghost that haunts in eternity, unless maybe the wedding guest retells his story, which he did. Samuel Taylor Coleridge might have been the wedding guest, and now the mariner is metaphysically set free. Or he's trapped in the pages of the book, /poem, /collection. But either way, love this guy, Samuel Taylor Coleridge. We'll come back to him in another session.